Hello, I'm Juliet Mann, and this is the Agenda podcast, CGTN Europe's one-stop shop for smart, in-depth discussion of the issues that really matter in the world today. The recent BRICS summit in Rio de Janeiro was the 17th annual gathering of the organisation, but it was the first since 13 new partner countries joined up, including Malaysia, Indonesia and Turkey. And matters were largely overshadowed by Donald Trump's threat on the last day of the meeting to impose a further 10% in tariffs on BRICS members for what he called anti-American policies. So just where does this leave the voice of the Global South? With me now are Patrick Bond, Distinguished Professor and Political Economist at the University of Johannesburg, Dr Ilango Karuppannan, the former Malaysian High Commissioner to Singapore and former Ambassador to Lebanon and Cyprus, and Dr Mohan Kumar, India's former Ambassador to France. Great to have all of you on the agenda. Patrick, let me start with you, because this was the first BRICS summit since that recent expansion. How do you think that maybe changed the dynamics?
Well, yes, so there's a new member, Indonesia, from January, and as you said, many new partners. I mean, it's interesting that two invitations, Algeria, which didn't show up, and Turkey, which sent a minor official, not Erdogan, and those are not yet accepted invitations. And likewise, the member from 2024, everyone's wondering about, Saudi Arabia. Still not clear. Is it a member of the BRICS or is it still siding with Donald Trump? So there's some uncertainty. Certainly a new partner, Malaysia, and the Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim stood out for giving maybe the most dynamic speech and bringing a certain maturity. And, maybe the other new member from last year, Iran, under attack last month from the United States and Israel, getting pretty much no support. 11 days it took before there was a sort of statement of concern from the BRICS foreign ministers. So I think this is an indigestion problem. Egypt and Ethiopia fighting against South Africa for, debating about the UN Security Council membership. It's still uneasy, uneven, unsettled, these new members.
Ilango, would you agree with it? It was, of course, as we've been hearing, Malaysia's first BRICS gathering as a partner nation.
Oh, yes, definitely. I think there's new energy and momentum after this expansion. To my mind, it reflects a strong demand for a more inclusive and multipolar system. But from my country's perspective, attending for the first time as a partner country, it is also a moment for careful observation. While the Prime Minister, has been on record saying that we see BRICS as the new frontier, domestic agencies such as the Trade Ministry and Foreign Ministry realistically working out the cost-benefit analysis of BRICS. So it is important to us that at the end of the day, BRICS delivers what we want, which is potential benefits and development, needs of Malaysia and the region as well.
Mohan, let's pick up on something that Patrick mentioned just there, that the meeting took place against this backdrop of very real geopolitical tensions. Where do you think that this gathering has provided maybe a sense of direction for the group?
I think I will make 3 points, really. First thing is that there was a lot of Cassandra-like predictions that if the grouping becomes large and unwieldy, it would lead to a lack of consensus. So the fact that they have been able to adopt a leader's declaration on the basis of consensus gives the lie to Cassandras. And I think, frankly, the BRICS has done a better job perhaps than G7, which was hardly able to say anything about Ukraine or about the attacks on Iran. So in that sense, that surprised me. The second thing I would like to say is that because a number of other fora are not performing, whether it is the UN Security Council, the non-aligned movement is dead and gone. So there is, I think, a felt need for countries belonging to the global south to do two things. One, they want to hedge their bets and spread their bets, if you like. They do not want to put all their eggs in one basket. Second, I do believe they are seeking a multipolar world, and in any case, the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, in an interview in February, acknowledged that the unipolar moment was an aberration and that we are in any case proceeding towards a multipolar world. So I see this as an expression of multipolarity. I see this as an expression of countries wanting to hedge their bets. I also see this as countries representing global south, which have, I think, finding a forum to express themselves on a full range of issues confronting the international community.
Well, we're talking about confronting the international community, and something which almost overshadowed BRICS, and certainly something the markets were chattering about, Patrick, was when Donald Trump announced these additional tariffs for BRICS nations and those who aligned with the BRICS for what he called anti-American policies. What do you think he meant by that?
Yes, I think, Justine, he's really talking about the threat of de-dollarization, because he's made this case on 8 other occasions. And indeed, in his cabinet, he expanded upon that. And he said, oh, the BRICS are broken and there's only a couple left. Well, he's not paying attention in 2 ways. One, the BRICS are growing and are more popular. But secondly, the de-dollarization agenda isn't real. There's a bit of trade finance. The BRICS New Development Bank hasn't expanded properly. They've actually put Russia under its sanctions, just like Western financiers, starting in March 2022. And so there's a lot of storm and drang. There's a lot of misinformation about what BRICS represents. So if you look, for example, at what is sometimes called multipolar, a desire for a fairer set of multilateral institutions and power balances, you'll actually find the BRICS promoting the IMF, promising more funding, that is the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, and in the World Trade Organization, which the US has been wrecking. And it's that, let's say, elephant in the room. Unfortunately, not enough spine in the BRICS political statement. They couldn't mention the United States, couldn't mention Donald Trump, but he is wrecking so much of multilateralism. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the World Health Organization. He's walked out of the AIDS cuts. The U.S. aid will kill millions, apparently, 18 million by 2030, according to a new Lancet published study. And the other destruction in world finance and trade means, I mean, we're asking this question in Johannesburg, host of the G20, does Donald Trump really belong in this space of multilateralism? Or maybe we should have a G19 here.
So let's then talk about BRICS' response to all of that, Ilango, because Brazil's President Lula called those extra threats of tariffs irresponsible. China also wading in, saying BRICS only advocates inclusivity. How do you think that the bloc is going to respond to Trump?
Well, I would like to take from what Dr. Mohan also mentioned, BRICS, I think at the core of it, it has shown this time and time again. Its interest is about, the global south, trying to make sure that, members of the global south have an equitable system in which they have a say, in which they can participate and, benefit from. So I think BRICS would certainly want to avoid confrontation or escalation in remarks to those threats. So I think we have to see those statements of the, the Brazilian president in the context. I mean, leaders have a certain audience that they need to satisfy too. So I think those statements have to be seen in that context. But I think at the end of the day, the interest of BRICS is to emphasize inclusivity and to keep dialogue open. So I think that is probably the favored way that BRICS is most likely to respond to Trump. Because at the end of the day, a confrontation is not going to lead BRICS to the direction that he wants to go, benefit for its members, in the global south speaking. And there's also, for countries like Malaysia and, others as well, we also recognize that, BRICS is important to us because it offers an opportunity to, hedge against external, shocks. So it's certainly not in our interest, at least, to escalate them, through confrontation.
And on that role of Donald Trump in the new world order, in a multi-polar world, I mean, what do you think, Mohan? Because President Lula also said the world has changed. We don't want an emperor.
I think if you assume that power is getting dispersed in a way that was not available when you had a unipolar moment, I think it's a fact that the power is getting widely distributed. What the BRICS countries are seeking is a fairer distribution of power and for the international fora to represent the contemporary power reality. The UN Security Council, for example, does not represent the contemporary reality at all. And there are others like the IMF and the World Bank, which are crying out for reform. The WTO, I was just telling my co-panelists, I spent 10 years negotiating on behalf of India at the WTO. And if I had known the WTO was going to meet this fate, I would have done something else, frankly. I feel terrible having devoted my life, and we built this wonderful organization, but it's nowhere. So as far as President Trump's statement is concerned, you will have to wait and see and assess how much of it is rhetoric and how much of it is really a serious threat. If the idea is for countries in BRICS to replace the dollar as a reserve currency, that could be conceivably interpreted as an anti-American act. I mean, India is certainly not seeking a replacement of the dollar as the reserve currency. Some countries may do that in the BRICS, but I don't think every BRICS country will subscribe to that. On the other hand, if BRICS is advocating more trade on the basis of national and local currencies, Mercosur has been doing it for ages. So this is not something new, frankly. So that could be done. So we will have to wait and interpret what is anti-American, because I cannot believe that mere participation in the BRICS will attract a tariff of 10%. That doesn't make sense to me. We'll have to wait and see. But I think it has got to be on the basis of BRICS countries adopting policies, and I will readily concede to you that there is no common view on this, frankly. I mean, the BRICS, you have to understand, is an incipient institution. It's a young institution, and the expanded version of BRICS is very, very new. I mean, to have countries like Iran on the one hand and Saudi Arabia on the other, that gives you an idea of the wide spectrum of countries that are represented in BRICS. We have democracies, we have countries which are maybe less democratic, we have countries which have a different political system. So I think you will find it hard put to believe that BRICS can take a monolithic view on some of these things. You will have to allow the institution some leeway and some time to evolve and then take positions. What they've done very well is to articulate clear positions on tariffs without naming the United States. They have, I think, made some statements with regard to the Middle East that the UN Security Council has not been able to do, and they have taken positions with regard to the WTO, which I find extremely interesting, because they have clearly said we must go back to the dual structure of the dispute settlement mechanism in the WTO. So they've made some comments and statements which are valid, but that is easier to do. The question in the next phase will be, how do you bring that statement and how do you implement that on paper?
Patrick, do you think the rest of the world, or perhaps the US in particular, misunderstands what BRICS really stands for?
Yes, I think, Juliet, it's actually that question that my panelists have raised, the speed and the intensity of offering an alternative that everyone's hinging their own actions on. Would we, for example, at some point see what China did in reaction to those tariffs, that is, to ban rare earth elements and therefore threaten some of the high tech in the US not having magnets? And we could do that here in South Africa with about 86% of the world's platinum, high levels of chromite, of manganese. These are the kinds of opportunities where, like OPEC in 1973, the sort of potential for a genuine fight back is there. And it's actually, I think, a lot more urgent than my two dear panelists are going to agree. I think we really, for example, when Lula hosts the climate summit, we really need much more action. And we know Donald Trump is a climate denialist, and the extent to which he's involved in any of these will be for sabotage. And him hosting the G20 next year is terrifying for genuine multilateral reform. And so therefore, I think we actually need to see the BRICS do more of what people think it would do. A real alternative, not a contingent reserve arrangement alternative to the IMF that's never existed, not the fabled alternative credit rating agency, a real one, something that could help delink. And then, because I think the Federal Reserve so badly abuses its power for quantitative easing, printing money, or raising the interest rate, affecting all of us in the world, we desperately do need moves towards genuine de-dollarization. So I'd really like to see a much stronger BRICS rather than this, rather vague and, diplomatically put project. And in India next year, I don't think we're going to get it, given that Narendra Modi and Donald Trump are a little bit more close. Maybe with the G7, with the tensions there, and some of the Europeans against Trump, there may be a better hope for a different kind of alliance that can really challenge some of these injustices and the climate catastrophe and public health, pandemic preparation, and all the rest of it.
You want, on the one hand, a stronger BRICS, but then, of course, we're also hearing that it's a very new alliance with new members with different priorities. So that's a real balance. I wonder then, Ilango, how you think that the BRICS can advance their goals without alienating vital trading partners like the United States, like the UK, like Europe, Australia.
Well, this is the Southeast Asian in me speaking now, I think BRICS can advance its goals by emphasizing complementarity. And this is the kind of approach that ASEAN members have always advocated, looking out for space or avenues for complementarity rather than confrontation. And I think, when we look at the BRICS members, large numbers of them have important trading and investment relations with the United States and Europe. Malaysia, for example, certainly, and the other ASEAN members who are also participating in BRICS. So I think, the way it should be going forward is to look at ways to cooperate rather than, shutting doors to to Europe and America. But I think at the end of the day, what is most important, and I think this is where it is sometimes attention is not very well given, communication. I think BRICS must be clear in the way it communicates its objectives and its ideals. I think we have made it clear in some ways that our interest is about promoting the interests of the Global South, providing opportunities, a more level field, a more predictable global trading system, et cetera, et cetera. And I think this is what we need to emphasize. We need to emphasize to the developed world that by deepening cooperation among ourselves does not necessarily mean, shutting them out. But it is also avenue for, engaging them in ways which are mutually beneficial.
Mohan, what's your take on the importance, or not, of the BRICS speaking with one voice on geopoliticals like, for example, trade? I wonder where you see the balance between what's best for India and what's best for the growing BRICS alliance.
I think it's easier to pronounce yourself when you are such a varied, when we've got such a varied membership. It's easier to pronounce yourself in favor of a two-state solution for Palestine, to pronounce yourself against the bombing of Iran, to say that Israel's actions in Gaza are unacceptable, or there should be a ceasefire and a full withdrawal of Israel from Gaza. Those things are easier to do. When it comes to trade, countries in the BRICS coalition, from my perspective, will be acutely aware that they are doing deals bilaterally. And the unfortunate reason for that is that the WTO is finished, at least as we know it. Multilateralism in trade is finished as well. It's just the FTAs that are working, so countries are really trying to do deals bilaterally. Now, if you're doing a deal bilaterally with the United States, And as India, for example, is right in the middle, the bang in the middle of concluding a trade deal with the United States, it'd be very difficult for us to say that, listen, what a country is doing is absolute rubbish, and that, we should be doing this and we should be doing that. So you will increasingly find that countries will balance their bilateral interests with what they think is the line that BRICS should be pursuing. It's pretty interesting, if you ask me, because the membership has become so varied now. And as I said earlier, the fact that they have achieved a consensus declaration should not be underestimated. G20 is finding it difficult to have a consensus. G7 is finding it difficult to get a consensus on anything. UN Security Council has wound up, in my view. It doesn't get a consensus on anything. UN General Assembly has become a ragtag talking shop. At a time like this, I would argue the BRICS hasn't done too badly. I certainly had my own doubts, and I thought the final declaration is a bit long for my liking, if you ask me. I mean, I wouldn't have liked it to be 5 paragraphs like the NATO declaration, but at least 20, 25. But this goes on to something like 125 paragraphs. I was looking at it. It took me a good 3 hours to go through the entire BRICS declaration. It's very long. But having said that, I think it's quite remarkable that they have been able to pronounce on every single challenge that the international community is facing without exception. They're talking of AI, they talk of cyber crimes, they talk of terrorism, they've talked of trade, they've talked of Gaza, they've talked of Iran, they've talked of Middle East, talked of tariffs. What more would you want from a new international organization? I think it's been fantastic from that point of view.
So, Patrick, what do you think? What more could we want? I mean, following on from the summit, where do you see maybe the main pressure points? Because some members prioritise economic cooperation more than others, for example.
I mean, that's right, Juliet. I think the point Mohan is driving at is that they've got good talk, or they can, we have a phrase here, talk left, walk right. The problem is it's not really implemented, for example, on concern about the genocide of Palestine. That was a word that Lula used, that South Africa uses, but the rest of the BRICS wouldn't use. And I think the main dilemma for, a pressure point, as you ask, geopolitically, that West Asian, the Middle Eastern conflicts with the likes of UAE and Egypt, very much sub-imperial allies of the US, and then Iran sitting on the other side. The pressure points, if you could get unity, I think would be to identify ideologically why a paleo-conservative, not necessarily, I don't think we take Marco Rubio too seriously when he uses the word multipolar, but a paleo-conservative United States wrecking so much of the world economy and threatening the climate. And I think that should be the pressure point coming up into the November meeting, first in Belém of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And the BRICS and the West have been fairly tightly allied. They have one big conflict, which is over carbon border adjustment mechanisms, that is trade sanctions, tariffs based not on this whimsical Donald Trump, but on the CO2 components embedded within the exports. And then secondly, we've got the G20 here, as I mentioned. And I think there's so little that it appears to be underway, given that the U.S. sabotages at every point. And it is quite urgent before, we have another 3.5 years of Donald Trump to come up with a more unified world, saying that there are just too many things he's done, withdrawal of emergency food aid, AIDS medicines, ending of climate support, too many things that the rest of the world has to pick up on. And we have to find a way to punish, maybe through a sanctions movement against the United States that, like China threatened with the rare earth minerals, really could hurt them.
Yeah. So look, we're talking about trade, critical minerals in particular. We talked about climate change and the voice that BRICS could have on that. Let's talk a little bit more about the Middle East, because that certainly came up at the summit. Ilango, as a former ambassador to Lebanon and Cyprus, I wonder what your perspective is, what role you think BRICS might have in helping bring peace or smooth things in the Middle East.
Well, I think the fact that BRICS has been able to, have a common position on the importance of, respecting international law and, in addressing the situation in the Middle East, I think it's a great, contribution by BRICS. Remember that BRICS, represents about half the world already. So I think it's a very strong voice, and I think it is probably the strongest contribution that BRICS can make. And I think the other organizations which which see their role as complementary to BRICS, such as ASEAN, would find it easy to build on what has been mentioned here in their own statements. The ASEAN ministers, for example, are meeting in Kuala Lumpur today and over the next few days. And I'm sure they will also be referring to the statement that came out of BRICS in respect of the Middle East.
Mohan, where do you think the real opportunity is for BRICS countries to further enhance that voice of the Global South?
I think South-South cooperation has taken a back seat. I used to do it as head of a think tank in India, but that can find renewed traction. I think there is so much expertise in the countries that belong to BRICS. China has done an amazing job of developing itself. India has done a great job in terms of digital public infrastructure and appropriate technology. I keep saying that not every country should be looking for Rolls-Royce technology. There is such a thing as frugal innovation, which can help many, many countries in the BRICS grouping and beyond. And I think climate change, SDGs, have taken a backseat. I say this with a great amount of regret. And that is something that BRICS countries can start focusing. If other countries are not willing to help, climate finance, for example, is key to the solution of the problem for countries like India. So if other countries, developed countries, don't want to do that, I'm not saying all of them are disinclined to do it, but some of them are. So maybe BRICS can help itself meet the tremendous climate change challenges that the developing world and the global south is facing. And finally, I would say also financing of development for SDGs. Look, truth be told, we are so off track when it comes to SDGs that the 2030 agenda is going to become a sad joke, frankly. Getting rid of extreme poverty, halving the level of poverty, achieving gender parity, good life or well-being, good, decent work, all of those goals are going to be difficult to achieve for the global south. And therefore, if BRICS can find a way through the new development bank and by mutual help, if we can get the countries going again in terms of getting them back on track to achieve the SDGs, that would be great for BRICS and for the world.
Mohan Kumar, Patrick Bond, Ilango, Karuppannan, thank you all very much. Remember, you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find more agenda content on CGTN Europe's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and YouTube channels. Until next time, goodbye.
The most interesting questions.
Are there other living beings beyond Earth?
Will man or machine be in charge?
Great question.
Always have more than one answer.
Well, hold on, let me just draw up a list.
And always come from more than one person.
That's where the credibility lies.
The concept of having a machinery which is alive and evolving didn't wait for us.
The end of inequality of incomes and wealth around the world, can you imagine how difficult that is at the moment to achieve?
Every episode, Stephen Cole, Murray Beveridge, and some of the brightest minds out there shed light on the answers to some of the most intriguing questions.
There are two ways of looking at this.
Machines can't really discriminate between civilian and military targets.
The Answers Project.
Maybe we need to just look at this in a bit more detail.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
The Answers Project, a new podcast from CGTN Europe.